Alright, today we're replacing brake pads and rotors on a Nissan Sentra. So what I've done already is while the car is still on the ground, I have loosened up these lug nuts. This particular car is a 19mm, and you can see in here that the brake pads are already grinding down on the rotor. This is way farther than you want to let it go. Normally for a brake pad job, once it starts squealing and squeaking, you can just replace the pads, which are inside of there. But in this case, she's waited so long we have to do the whole rotor as well. I will list all the parts in the video description below, the brake pads and the rotors, so it'll be easy for you to find them. I use Amazon for most of my parts. Pretty cheap, plus with the Prime and the fast shipping, it's pretty nice. So now I have the car jacked up and supported by the jack stands. Multiple points of contact are always a good thing. And now I'm going to take off these caliper bolts. So this guy right here is called the caliper, and this is what your brake pads are in. And so there's two caliper bolts, one on the top here and then one on the bottom down, well, at the bottom. That is a 19mm bolt as well on both sides. So the caliper, now that those two bolts are off, will just pop right off of the rotor. So one of the brake pads just fell out. And you can see the one brake pad right there, and then the piston, which is that thing in the center. So this hose right here is the brake line hose, and you can't let the hose hold the weight of the caliper. So you have to support the caliper on the strut. And here we have the brake fluid reservoir. So I'm going to unscrew the cap, because when we compress the piston, it's going to raise the fluid level up. And we want to make sure that there's not air trapped inside of there, so it'll let the liquid rise. So what I'm doing right now is I have this big C-clamp, and I took the old brake pad and put it back into place, and I'm pressing on the brake pad to push in that piston again, because the new brake pads are a lot thicker than the old ones, so there has to be more space between the walls for the new pads to fit and still fit over both sides of the rotor. And now that that piston is compressed, I can take the new brake pad and slide it into place and put the other one on that side. And there you go. Both brake pads are now in place. When you're putting them in, try not to touch the edge of them, so you don't want the oil and grease from your fingers to mess up with your stopping power. So the rotor is usually stuck on there pretty tight. In my case, I just took the hammer and nailed it twice, little rubber mallet, nailed it twice, and it broke it loose. And then it just pulls right off. You can see both sides of the rotor there. It's pretty torn up. And then you just pop the new rotor onto place. So as a side note, if your rotor doesn't come off with the hit of a hammer, there's these little holes right here for bolts. And if you just screw a bolt into that, it'll stick out the other side of the rotor and press it out away from the vehicle. So just get a bolt that fits in that hole and press it out. That's only if they're really rusted on there though. Anyway, it was definitely time for new ones. And now I'm going to get the caliper set back in place over the rotor and then bolt it back into place with both of those 19mm bolts. And then I'll get the tire back on. So I put the tire on, tightened the lug nuts down, then I dropped the car all the way down to finish tightening them once the tire was back on the ground again. So yeah, there's that. And then you can see in the brake fluid reservoir over there that there's more brake fluid in there now, just because we had compressed the piston. So one really important thing you got to do before you start driving though, is once you turn the car on, pump the brakes a couple times so that the pistons will close over the rotor and clamp on it. If you just start driving, the pistons won't be close enough to the rotor and they won't stop you. So be super careful about that, just pump the brakes. So for this car, the Nissan Sentra, the process is pretty much the same for all four tires. You got disc brakes in the front and the rear. If you have any other questions, be sure to leave them in the comments below. I respond pretty regularly. Don't forget to like if this video helped you, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching.